Hacking has increasingly become what governments consider a legitimate investigative tool. They use the same methods and techniques as criminal hackers. And what this means is they will try to remotely take over your device. Once they do this, by detecting a vulnerability in the software that your device runs, such as Apple's iOS or Microsoft Windows, they can craft a special kind of attack code called an exploit. They then launch this exploit at the vulnerability on your device, which allows them to take total control of that device. Anything you can do on that device, the attacker, in this case the government, can do. People tend not to take them very seriously and move on from them. But over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up, and you feel compelled to talk about it. And the more you talk about it, the more you're ignored, the more you're told it's not a problem, until eventually you realize that these things need to be determined by the public, not by somebody who was simply hired by the government. They can read your email, they can collect every document, they can look at your contact book, they can turn the location services on, they can see anything that is on that phone instantly and send it back home to the mothership. They can do the same with laptops. When you're in positions of privileged access, like a systems administrator for these sort of intelligence community agencies, you're exposed to a lot more information on a broader scale than the average employee. And because of that, you see things that may be disturbing, but over the course of a normal person's career, you'd only see one or two of these instances. When you see everything, you see them on a more frequent basis. And you recognize that some of these things are actually abuses. And when you talk to people about them, in a place like this where this is the normal state of business, people tend not to take them very seriously and move on from them. But over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up. NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can, by any means possible, that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. The other prong that we forget so frequently is that in many cases, they don't need to hack our devices. They can simply ask Google for a copy of our email box, because Google saves a copy of that. Everything that you ever typed into that search box, Google has a copy of. Every private message that you've sent on Facebook, every link that you've clicked, everything that you've liked, they keep a permanent record of. And all of these things are available not just to these companies, but to our governments, as they are increasingly deputized as sort of miniature arms of government. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything. I've been a systems engineer, systems administrator, senior advisor for the Central Intelligence Agency, solutions consultant, and a telecommunications information systems officer. But I, sitting my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email. If you can do it, they can do it. It is trivial to remotely turn on your microphone or to activate your camera, so long as you have systems level access. If you had hacked someone's device remotely, anything they can do, you can do. They can look up your nose, right? They can record what's in the room. The screen may be off as it's sitting on your desk, but the device is talking all of the time. I don't think that's especially surprising. There was a story published in the New York Times, actually reporting on a study in February of 2018. And it was also done in the Washington Post a few months prior to that, about the record of electoral interference. And they looked at the history of Russia and the Soviet Union and electoral interference by intelligence agencies. And they found, I think, 36 different cases of electoral interference over roughly the past 50 years. But then they also looked at the United States intelligence services and found that we had interfered in foreign elections 81 different times. Now, this is not to say one is better than the other. It's not about that. It's about budget, it's about capability. I think everyone would agree, probably including the Russian president himself, that he is an authoritarian leader. I think the Russian government broadly does not have a good record on human rights, and that hasn't changed. I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens. But what we do see from this is that what happened in 2016 actually was not unusual from the perspective of intelligence agencies. This is what they believe they are hired to do. What we have to do is find out how to secure our systems against the attacks that we know are inevitable. But they're typically maligned. It becomes a thing of these people are against the country, they're against the government. But I'm not. I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong. I was intentionally charged, as every major whistleblower in the last decades has been, with a very particular crime. This is a violation of the Espionage Act of 1917. And this is a law that is explicitly designed to prohibit a meaningful defense in court. This law is used against people the only thing that they've done, and this is by the government's own terms, the only thing the government accuses people defending themselves against this charge have done is that they have told something to a journalist that the government considers classified. And I'm willing to go on the record to defend the authenticity of them and say, I didn't change these, I didn't modify the story. This is the truth, this is what's happening. You should decide whether we need to be doing this. That is the whole of the crime. They don't consider whether it was good or bad. They don't consider whether or not it caused harm. Simply, did you tell something classified to a journalist? If you did, the jury is not allowed to consider. In fact, they're explicitly forbidden from considering why you told journalists. They're explicitly forbidden from considering, did it result in a public benefit, right? Did it further the public interest? Instead, they simply say, did you tell a journalist something classified? They don't consider whether or not it caused harm. Simply, did you tell a journalist something classified? If you did, the jury is not allowed to consider. In fact, they're explicitly forbidden from considering, did it result in a public benefit, right? Did it further the public interest? Instead, they simply say, did you tell a journalist something classified? So I am not, if I had stayed in the United States, and my good friend Daniel Ellsberg, by the way, has told me that I was right not to stand and wait for an inevitable arrest, because the laws and the way they're enforced today is not the same as the 19